Okay, thank you very much. We'll go back to our panelists, and Jason, the next question is yours and we'll be starting with Cliff.
All right, bear with me here. It's kind of long-winded, but I was talking to Cormac Collier about this, and I agree with him that there's a sort of a theme in a lot of town meeting articles this year that speaks to the balance of power between town meeting voters on one hand versus the island's elected and appointed officials and the town staff on the other hand. Articles that deal with the coastal management plan, the moratorium on coastal engineering structures, Grant's article about the parking garage, Article 59 dealing with moving town offices out of downtown with or without a vote at town meeting. So I was hoping you could speak to your thoughts on this as far as where the decision-making power should rest with voters at town meeting or with our elected and appointed officials in the town.
I'd rather have it lay with the voters at town meeting so I can't be blamed for all the mistakes that I made. I think that's what it comes down to. Mostly, I'd like to have most of the decisions decided at town meeting. It's your money, and that's what you should be doing. You should be voting your money and where the town's headed.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Well, you know, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a myriad of laws which tell you what has to be decided by the population, which is the town meeting. And that is most of everything. Anything that has to do with the town land, of zoning, the people have to vote on this. And I believe that possibly agencies in the town have tried to promulgate things through their own authority. If it's within state law, that's fine. If it is not, then there's a disconnect. The most important aspect of our democracy is the town meeting. And it shouldn't be hurried. Everybody should be listened to.
Thank you. Tobias?
I think there needs to hark on what Steve said. There needs to be a greater focus on what is coming to town meeting. I personally feel that a lot of the zoning issues, there's a number of articles that aren't of much interest to people in our town, but there's a few articles that are very important to people in town. So I think for town meeting, we can focus on those articles, get more people out to vote, get them more involved in the system, and give the voters more influence over what's going on. Because the more people we can get involved in town meeting, the more efficiently we can run it. And that's the objective, is to get people involved to be part of town meeting. If only 1,500 people out of 10,000 residents are showing up for town meeting, there's not a lot of validity in that. And we need to think about getting more people involved to make it meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
I think if we can't get greater citizen participation in town meeting, we're going to have to seriously think about a different form of government, perhaps a representative town meeting. And I think we're about to embark on a great experiment next Saturday, and I think the outcome of that experiment may determine what direction we want to go. I know it's an idea that people have difficulty with, but I don't think it's right to have 200 or 300 people making decisions that are going to impact the community for a long time. And along those lines, specifically with the issue that Jason mentioned, moving town jobs out of town. I think in principle, we all want to keep as many town jobs in town as possible. But I think it's a big mistake to tie the hands of the people who have to evaluate and make decisions on these issues. It should be about functionality, and if the 90% of the jobs can stay in town, I don't think we want to have a bylaw in place that prohibits us making the right decision in order to protect one job that might need to move out of town. So I think we need to be more flexible, and if we can't make town meeting work, I think we should consider alternatives.
Thank you. I see in the audience question that this point that you're making actually is reflected in many of the questions that I'll get to later on that have to do with who takes responsibility and how do you best address this. The next question is from Grant, and we're going to start with Steve.
Gentlemen, this is a one-seat year. Everyone gets one vote for selectmen, but if this were a two-seat year, who would your second vote go to, given the same number of candidates on the ballot, and why?
That's an interesting one. Steve, you're the first one to answer.
Well, if I had two votes, I'd vote for myself and Mr. Glidden and Mr. Clifford.
And early and often, huh?
Yes. But I just, for a second, since I have some time, I want to get back to the town meeting. Since I've been going to town meetings, which is sometime in the late 50s, not all in Nantucket, I've only been going to these for about 40 years, something has really disturbed me, and that is the moderator's insistence that we hurry up and finish the meeting. That is totally ridiculous. Just the one time in the year that we exercise our democracy. Take it easy. Let everybody talk. When they say the same thing the fourth time, that's it. But, you know, the town meeting is important. And it's not a matter of hurrying it up. It's a matter of slowing it down.
Okay, thank you. Tobias?
I'd like to address this question in two ways. For one, I feel that as running for selectman, I feel that I'd rather not people vote for me, but because I want to be humble. But I want people to vote for me because I want people to be involved in our community, and I want to bring that to the community. And so what I look for in a leader is someone who is humble and you can talk to and interact with. And so Mr. Williams, just by seeing him sitting over there, he's very calm, he's relaxed, he reads his issues, he's not hasty to decide things, he's not very charismatic, but he's thinking about his issues, he's talking about them, and I mean that in the best regards. So thank you.
All righty. Good luck following that, Bruce.
I'm going to make it unanimous. I would vote for Mr. Williams in addition to myself. I think he's had an active role in the Finance Committee, and I think he's knowledgeable in a lot of different areas. I think Tobias is a very strong candidate, and I think eventually he will grow into one that I could really enthusiastically support, but I think it's a little bit of a leap to jump in at the selectman's level at your first role in government. And I've always enjoyed Steve. I think he contributes a lot, but my sense has been this year that his heart isn't entirely in it, and that perhaps he's looking for more of a platform than he is for the opportunity to make a contribution.
All right. Thank you. Cliff, it's your turn.
Super. No write-in candidate? I can try that.
Go ahead.
Bruce, someone asked me this question yesterday, and I picked Bruce only because I don't know him that well. I don't know all the candidates all that well, but I figured because he's been on the Finance Committee, he's worked within the town for a long time, and that's a big leap just to figure out where you stand, what direction you're going in, and what your authority is. So I based it simply on that.
All right.
Could I follow up or respond to that?
Sure.
I just wanted to say briefly that I think part of being a selectman is not so much your experience, but your willingness to learn on the job. And being a selectman, you come up with all sorts of different issues. And so being a young person, I would like to just say that even though I am not experienced, I have the energy to go out and learn about these issues. And I think that's really important when we're evaluating who we choose as selectmen. Thank you.
You're welcome. All righty. We're getting a few more questions from the audience. I've got quite a few here. I'm going to apologize early because we're not going to get to all of them, but we are going to go for about another 20 minutes with the selectmen, just so the folks that are going to be on the school committee can get an idea. So I'm going to ask the next question from the audience, and then we'll go back to the panelists. I'm hoping I'm not stealing anyone's thunder. I would repeat, too, if you're writing down a question, please make sure not to address a specific candidate. I'm only pulling questions that I think are general, that apply to all the candidates. So this next question is, what is your position on the town allowing long-term private use of town property? Should the decision to allow long-term use be made by the town manager, the BOS, or by town meeting? And it also kind of folds into what we've been talking about. And we will start with Tobias on this. Go Tobias, Bruce, Cliff, and then Steve.
I think it depends a lot on the context of which we're using land, and in that regards, I think it should be the Board of Selectmen because they represent the people and the people's needs. I think one of the reasons why we're looking at using town land for things is horticulture and horticultural purposes, and I think we need to encourage people to be more involved with the land and the community on Nantucket, and so I would support the town allowing people to use land for those purposes specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
I think whenever you talk about truly long-term, which I assume means 30 or 40-year leases, my inclination would be that's the kind of thing the town meeting should have the ultimate decision on.
Okay, thank you. Cliff?
It's probably in reference to the coastal management plan. Yeah, when it comes to, I think, small things like we gave permission for an easement for someone to go across the land to stop some erosion. I think it was in Madaket. I can't remember. That's one thing. But I think if you're going to dramatically impact the land as we are, ensconce it, I think it's a town meeting vote.
Okay. Thank you. Steve?
Anything that has to do with the long-term use of town land must be answered at the town meeting. Because once you allow the land to be used for a long period of time, you don't have the land. So it's essentially like selling it. The townspeople are the only ones to answer on that. I just want to get back to the Finance Committee a bit. Everybody seems to be revering the Finance Committee. I don't think too well of them. In the 40 years I've been going to town meetings and listening to their recommendations, I probably wasn't in favor of them, maybe 50% or less. They are a group who assesses the pluses and minuses of the financial situation. They do not look into the political and philosophical aspects of the situation. That's what's important.
Thank you, Steve. Alrighty, so we are going to, that was from the audience question, and now we're going to go to Jason, and our first respondent will be Bruce. So, Jason?
Okay, thank you. I thought we'd hit on one of the articles at town meeting and an important question on the Sachem's Path affordable housing project. The Finance Committee recommended against the CPC's recommendation to fund this project, and that's important because if the funding doesn't go forward in that article, the project doesn't go forward either. So I'd like to get your sense of whether you agree with their recommendation and give us your understanding about the current need or lack thereof of a project like Sachem's Path right now.
Thank you. Bruce?
I'm really glad you asked that question. It perfectly illustrates the approach I've tried to take to get my hands around some of these issues, and I think I've spent more time talking to people about that one than any other. And in fact, I started out slightly negative on the idea. I've always sort of believed that we've put too much and too many of our resources into affordable housing. But I've come around to a different point of view, and I now think I'm going to support it for a number of reasons. One, I think we're eventually going to do it. So if the money's there, let's do it now. I think interest rates are very low, so it's a good time to do it. I think the building trades can use the additional work, and I've been assured that if it moves ahead, the organization coordinating it is going to use local tradesmen, which I think is very important. And then the final piece of the puzzle that I learned was that while there are, in fact, condominiums on the market, I spoke to some people in the banking business who tell me that in order to finance one of the condos that might be on the business, an individual would have to make a 20% down payment, which is pretty daunting, whereas the houses that are proposed for Sachem's Path would require only a 5% down payment. So it simply is comparing apples to oranges, and I think I'm on the side of, I disagree with the Finance Committee, and I support the project.
Okay, thank you. Clifford?
I was away on vacation when they snuck a meeting in and changed their mind. I can't do much more. Was I chewing on it? Anyway, originally we supported it. This is where it gets complex for me. I like things that are just black and white. We've already voted for this money, CPC money, every year. That's what it's supposed to be used for. So my first inkling was I'm not supposed to be voting whether I necessarily agree with affordable housing as much as I just agree with the appropriation. And I never really got an answer from anyone. Anyhow, it's a different 40B. A lot of people have expressed they don't want to see another failed 40B, but this 40B is a totally low-income housing, and as Bruce has said, I think it's different from trying to go out and buy some distressed property on Nantucket, where the argument is there's a bunch of property that you can buy at those numbers. You don't have the help that you get through this form of housing.
Okay, thank you. Now, Steve?
Who's next?
That's you.
Steve, the question's to
okay.
you now on Satchin's Path.
I don't like to see the island covered with buildings, but I really like to see some affordable housing. Lo and behold, I totally agree with Mr. Miller. Totally agree with him. You have to have affordable housing on Nantucket, and the state law apportions, the people own the land, they're allowed to build on it. If they want to get past the Nantucket zoning restrictions, they go under the state law, and they can bypass them a bit. So we lose, but we gain. I agree with Mr. Miller 100%. Go with it.
Thank you, Steve. Tobias?
I'm supportive of the project. One thing I'd like to talk about in regards to this is the FinCom's decision behind it. The FinCom makes decisions based on, to my understanding, a mandate set up by the Board of Selectmen to keep the town's budget in check. And this year, the town approached 12.6% of expenditures servicing debt. And so that was one of the reasons why they voted against this project, as well as the wind turbine project, not because it wasn't economically viable, but because they were fulfilling their jobs as being watchdogs over the town's finances. Another thing I'd like to talk about in regards to this project is the location. Why are all the projects focused over on Surfside that is this like low-income area? Shouldn't we, like many diverse communities, integrate these low-income houses with other places on the island? Why are they pushed off into the corner of the island? And I think that's something we should be talking about as members of this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next question will be coming from Grant Sanders, and the first respondent will be Cliff.
I just wanted to get everybody's position on the idea of building a parking garage in downtown Nantucket. Are you for it? Are you against it? And why?
I think we go over this parking garage thing every year, even though it's just a concept. I'd like to see something done to help the parking situation downtown. And I would be for a parking garage if we could make it not look like a parking garage, where you just kind of disappeared into a door somewhere and went into almost like a condominium complex or some type of building, as I've seen in other towns. So I guess I would be for it, depending on what it looks like. And like I said, I'd want it disguised as not a parking garage.
Alrighty, Steve?
I don't like cars. I don't like garages. I'm an old timer, but I'm not that old. The building above, well, the story above where I had my restaurant, it had the drive club in it, and in around the First World War, they started this cars started to appear, and the ride club was a horseman's club, and they finally allowed automobile drivers to get into the club and became the Ride and Drive Club. I wouldn't have allowed them.
Alrighty, Tobias?
I am strongly against this idea of building a parking garage. I think it shows a very poor example of leadership by the Board of Selectmen or anyone in favor of supporting it. People talk about revitalized downtown, and we need to realize that downtown is where people walk. It's not where people drive. We need to focus on ways of getting bicycles and pedestrians downtown. We need to show that the island is moving forward in regards to our downtown economy. And that should be 100% focused on pedestrians. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Bruce?
I think we have a terrible congestion and parking problem in town, particularly during the summer months, that needs to be addressed. I would say that the parking garage is probably the last resort, not because it's a bad idea, but because, like the windmill, it's become so controversial. I think there are other alternatives that could be thoroughly explored before we had to go to a parking garage. We have existing parking lots that could be developed, and perhaps we could implement new policies. There's some vacant land that belongs to the electric company that I think might be exploited if we can allow that, if they will allow us to use it. And as Clifford said, if we do, in fact, eventually have to move to a parking garage, I have seen in my travels a great number of parking garages that you can drive by many times without recognizing you've even seen a garage. So if it has to be a garage, we shouldn't rule it out of hand, but I think we should explore the other alternatives first.
All right. Everyone got to respond?
Can I follow up on that, please?
25 seconds.
I think we need to focus on the fact that parking is treating the symptom of the problem and not the disease. The disease is that people are not coming downtown, and we need to get them walking downtown, not driving. Cars break up communities. It's been recorded many times. You see bypasses through major cities. They break up communities. We need to get people in town and the cars outside of town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah,
Sure.
can I have
Yes.
a moment?
25 seconds.
I changed my mind. I cast both my votes for Tobias Glidden.
In the interest of fairness, does either Bruce or Clifford want any other follow-up on this question? Because it's a big question, I'd have to say, but it's also one of the questions from the audience.
I'd like to have some follow-up at some point on the discussion about how the Finance Committee operates.
All right, well, let's do that right now. Let's have a follow-up question.
If I may, I was on the Finance Committee for 14 years, and I was very proud of what we accomplished, and I was very proud about the way in which we accomplished it. Many of the problems that I see with the way the selectmen operate are a result of the fact that they don't operate the way the Finance Committee does. The Finance Committee enjoys a very collegial atmosphere and environment where during the course of the meetings you get to actually exchange ideas with each other. And as a result, most of the votes that we had at Finance Committee were unanimous, not because we started out with the same point of view and we were a bunch of Phil Bartlett stooges, but because we listened to each other and we formulated opinions that we could all get behind by finding the common ground and identifying it and putting forth something to the community that they could accept. And most years, at least 95% of the votes at town meeting were supportive of the recommendations of the Finance Committee, and I think one year, 100% were. And that was a result of a lot of hard work. And secondly, and lastly, it's not just about the budget. The Finance Committee's charge is, yes, address the budget, but it also is charged with researching and making a recommendation on every single article on the town warrant, which we did. Thank you.
I'll let each person here respond either to the role of the Finance Committee, or if you want to introduce any thoughts on other committees that serve the BOS, you're welcome to, but just 45 seconds for follow-up on this if you so desire. Cliff is all set. Steve, any?
Yeah, I mean, they're overblowing the Finance Committee. To me, the Finance Committee is, as I've followed it year after year after year, yes, they deliberate, yes, there's some smart guys on it, but its importance is not to the point. The people's vote is the important thing. The Finance Committee makes a recommendation. You can take it or leave it. And as I said before, I've left it more than I've taken it.
All righty. Next, Tobias, do you have anything to add?
I would like to thank the Finance Committee for all their hard work. I think they do a really hard job, which is getting down to the bottom of the money on this one, and many issues. And I feel that, again, you know, their job is to look at the finances. If they recommend it, they recommend it. If they don't recommend it, they don't. And it should come down to us individuals at town meeting whether we vote no or against it. And we should hold it within our own judgment to decide what they think is true or false. Thank you.
As you can see, each of these candidates is a firm believer in democracy and in having and exercising your right to vote. This is the last call I'm going to have for any members of the audience. I've got one audience question here that I'm going to reserve for a chance for both Jason and Grant to ask questions. And so if anyone, this is going to be your last call on any questions to the selectmen. And I'm going to go to, right now I should be back on Jason, right? Okay. So Jason, we probably will just have enough time for both of you to get one last question in. If you have a burning one that we have time for follow-up, we'll do that. And we want to leave at least after the school committee questions, we want to leave some time at the end of closer to 3 to talk amongst yourselves and with the selectmen. But Jason?
Okay.
And the first person for this will be Tobias.
All right. Part of being a selectman is, you know, you have to vote on the small stuff, relocating a telephone pole or whatever. One other part of it is looking at the big picture. And I'd like you guys to speak to where you see the island economy going in the next 3 years over your term if you're elected. And what are some things that the selectmen can do to make it easier for working families on the island, whether that's changing certain fees that the town assesses or sewer costs? What are things that you guys can do if you're on the board to help working families on the island and the island economy?
I think over the next 3 years, that's a very short period of time for major changes. So we need to focus on small incentive projects that, in regards to sewer, allow people alternatives to sewer, and we need to open up the bureaucracy in the town that allows people other solutions to their problems, and as opposed to holding them back from doing smart things. And we need to come up with policy that enables people to make those differences. In regards to longer-term planning beyond 3 years, I think Nantucket really needs to decide about where their economy is going. You can't be a tourism community forever, and you can't focus on something 100%. We need to focus on other things locally to sustain ourselves over the next 100 years. You know, the Cherokee chief once said we need to look at 7 generations to make a good decision, and I'm someone who thinks that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
I think we have to do everything we can to encourage and support the tourism industry. I think we have to do everything we can to make sure that we have a thriving scallop industry. I think as a town we have to try to minimize unnecessary regulations. I think, and that doesn't mean a lack of regulations. I would point to the health department as an example of good regulation. I've been in the restaurant business out here for a long time, and our health department is very, very tough, but very, very fair. And as a result, everybody knows what to expect, and the regulation is very fairly applied. And when was the last time you heard about a restaurant having a problem with food poisoning or anything like that? And I think the answer to that is just about never. So I think we need to have some common sense, and we need to look a little bit into the future in terms of perhaps the downtown revitalization issues that came up before. And I guess that's about it.
I think the problem everywhere, if you go to any town, when I grew up here, everything was, in a sense, free. Now you have to pay to go to the beach, you have to pay to catch a fish, you have to pay to park your car. I think we have to look, and we're going to do this hopefully after town meeting with the selectmen and the finance committee, for a long-term capital goal projects, how we can pay for things without just doing overrides continuously. And we've just spoken about it also, is trying to straighten out the sewer issues that we have, trying to divide up the high cost of huge capital projects to one sector of the population. I don't think is fair, and it's just become overwhelming, along with everything from to fair plan insurance, to you add that to your taxes, and we're just getting steamrolled with an overwhelming expense to live here.
Alrighty, Steve?
The most important thing we can do in government to improve the lot of the residents is to have an increase in transparency and honesty in the government. And by that I mean open books and records. Everything that goes on, the public has the ability to see and read. This will ensure that our scarce tax money is spent with the community in mind, rather than spending it on collecting junk or building big things. Ego.
Alrighty, that should be everyone there. We're going to give Grant a chance to ask one last question, and then you'll have your closing remarks for 1 minute, and then we'll change out for the school committee. So, Grant?
As I've said many times, Nantucket is a place where lots of people complain. If we had a complaining Olympics, we'd get gold medal, gold, silver, and bronze in every game. But we've had some things to complain about. In the past 18 months, there have been 2 rather obvious instances of financial situations that have shaken the ordinary taxpayer's faith in their local government. I'm talking about the Finance Committee's inability to get their audits together. And I'm talking about the situation at the airport. What can the Board of Selectmen do to help restore some faith in their in our local government?
First person answering that's Bruce.
I think in regard to the airport, I think we have to recognize that, like everything else on Nantucket, the issues involved have gotten a lot more complex than they were when we first set up the airport, whenever it was 50 years ago. And keeping that in mind, I think we need to try to recruit and appoint committee members who have a higher degree of expertise that is going to be required. We need to have some financial minds on the airport commission, and not just pilots. And I think that would go a long way. And I think we have to have a much stronger feedback loop so that the airport commission more regularly comes back to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and keeps them up to date with what's going on, so we never again get surprised. With regard to the audit situation in the Finance Department, I believe that's pretty much under control. I think the answer there would have been to not take anything at face value, and again, to make sure that what we were being told what was in fact what was happening, which wasn't always the case. And I think it's been basically fixed, though.
Thank you. Cliff?
Seeing I was directly involved in, I think I was, in the airport debacle, that's a great question. I asked questions for years about the airport and how they could do things the way they do, and I never got a straight answer from anyone. The selectmen had the ability to step up to the plate and stop a lot of it. So not to cast blame, hopefully we can look forward. I think it's, I always hear the term, we need an expert, we need this, great brain. I think we need people that we can trust. I don't necessarily think when it comes to running the town government or the airport, if you want specialized knowledge, you hire an accountant, hopefully one you can trust, and he can interpret the numbers to you. And in the end, we're going to find out whether they're right or wrong, because that's math's pretty simple. So I think we need to vote more people in and appoint more people we can trust.
Good. Thank you. Steve?
There was no surprise about the Airport Commission, at least to some of us. In 2002, when I was selectman, I went to a number of Airport Commission meetings, and the impression I got from those meetings were that it was operated like a little club. There was no human interaction. They were rude, short, and imperious to the population. I said to the selectmen in 2002, we got to get rid of these people. We had time to get rid of two. The selectmen over the next 10 years continuously appointed these people. Okay, how do we stop this? We stop it by having the selectmen go out and look into what's going on in the commissions and the departments, not just sit blah, blah, blah at the town meeting. I mean, at the selectmen's meeting. Have some interaction with your town offices. Otherwise, you're going to be surprised.
Thank you. Tobias?
I think the selectmen definitely need to take a more active role in sitting on boards, other boards in the community. They do take part in that, and they need to continue that further to really get a handle on things. To address the question more directly to accountability in our government, I think accountability comes from people knowing what's going on and interacting with our government. We need to get people more involved with our government, and so the more people we have involved, the more accountable someone can be held. If there's only a few people, we're seeing here, these are our potential governing body, and we only have maybe 50 people here that are interested in what we have to say. Directly, there's also going to be people online, but we need to get more people involved to have accountability take place in our community. And that is the fundamental, I really believe, for dealing with these issues. We need to get local people involved with the commission, the Airport Commission, to deal with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll allow each of you a 1-minute statement. Steve, we'll start with you and then go down the line.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this airport debacle is really a shame. Because what went on that has been uncovered probably went on for the past 10 years and previous to that, and we'll never know. And the reason is that government is not paying attention to the details of government.
Tobias?
I'd like to say thank you for everyone who came and took part. I'd like to say what I would bring to the Board of Selectmen is positivity, bringing people in, bringing ideas in, new ideas. We need some new direction in the town. Things are getting bogged down, I find, and we need to try different things if we're going to have solutions to these difficult problems we're having. I have a lot of passion for life and learning, and I would take that to the Board of Selectmen and help drive to come up with new solutions to our problems. And ultimately, I'd look at a long-term future for what's going on in Nantucket and how I could help guide the people of Nantucket to a more sustainable future. So thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you again to the Civic League. I hope I have demonstrated and will continue to demonstrate that I will be an outstanding selectman. I think I have some valuable experience that I bring to the table. I think I'm at a point in my professional life where I will have the time to dedicate to the task. I think I've demonstrated the ability to solve problems. And perhaps most importantly, I'm truly enthusiastic and energized about having the opportunity to get involved and maybe help some of these things work out more satisfactorily than they have been. And although I'm sure not everyone will agree with me on every issue, I think it's pretty obvious, or I hope it's obvious, that I always do my homework. And if there's always a reason for me having the point of view that I do, and it may not be the one you share, but you can count on the fact that I've worked hard to get where I am. So please remember to vote, and yes, it's Miller time.
Okay, Clifford, you get the last word.
Again, thanks to the Civic League and the panel and the audience for showing up. I'm looking for your vote. I've been at this for 3 years. I've dedicated a lot of time and effort. I think I've not taken a lot of it personally. I try to just go by the book. It's kind of black and white to me. It's either right or wrong. We need to, spend money on certain things or not spend money on certain things. We have to be responsible to the community and to the future of Nantucket. And I hope I've reflected that trust. And look for your vote. Thank you.
Sarah,
Thank you.
I didn't realize this was a summing up.
That's because you didn't listen to me.
Can I have 30 seconds to sum up? Excuse me?
That's because you didn't listen to me, because I said it very clearly.
Well, I didn't hear it. I must have been dreaming. But I am running for selectman because the most important thing to me are the people of Nantucket and their needs and desires. That is my focus, period.
All right. Thank you. All these folks are, I think, excellent candidates. We'll have a chance
Oh,
for
and
you
thank
to-
you. Excuse me.
You're welcome. And thank you to the Civic League. We're going to proceed very quickly because I'd want to give Melissa a chance for us to talk to the school committee incumbent and potential challengers. So we're going to exchange and have the school committee folks come up here. Melissa Murphy is an incumbent, and Jen Eller and Barry Paulson are both challengers. We've got 2 positions open. Take about 2 minutes to change everything around, and then we'll get started again. We had some great questions from the audience. Please be sure to ask them of our candidates when you get a chance.
Fun. Yeah, that was good.
That was good.
Steve. He's great. I like all these guys.
Thank all of you.